Before beginning the story, I'd like to say a big thank you for visiting my new channel. I'm going to be uploading alternate history-related stories every single day. If that sounds good, be sure to leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. It means a whole lot when just getting started. I hope you enjoy the story. I need to start with something most people don't think about when they think about Everest. There are over 200 bodies on that mountain. Dead climbers, most of them from the last 50 years, left where they fell, because getting them down is in many cases more dangerous than leaving them. The cold preserves them almost perfectly. Some of them have been up there for decades and look, by most accounts, like they died last week. The climbing community knows them. Some of them have informal names given over years by the people who pass them on the way up and on the way down. They are waypoints, landmarks, part of the mountain's geography in a way that feels permanent because it has been permanent, because the cold holds everything in place and the altitude keeps most people too focused on surviving to disturb anything. I know all of this because knowing it was part of my job. I was a base camp communications coordinator for a commercial expedition company running guided Everest summits. My third season, I sat in the communications tent, managed radio traffic, tracked team positions on GPS software, relayed weather updates, and kept a whiteboard with every climber's location updated throughout the day. I was the person who knew where everyone was at all times, which meant I was the first person to know when something stopped being where it was supposed to be. It was mid-May, peak season. Base camp on the Nepal side was a small city of colored tents spread across the Khumbu Glacier. Generators running, wind working at everything constantly. The particular compressed energy of a place full of people waiting for the weather to cooperate so they can go do something that could kill them. I had 3 teams to track that morning. Team Alpha was at Camp 3, acclimatizing before a summit push in 2 days. Our lead guide, Otto, was with them. Otto had been on this mountain 31 times. He was the kind of person who made you feel like everything was manageable just by being in radio range. Team Bravo was at Camp 2, resting between rotations. Their lead was a veteran named Dar, who had summited 4 times and had a talent for keeping nervous clients steady. The third situation was a solo client named Cassidy. Experienced, strong record, had negotiated to move independently above Camp 2 with scheduled radio check-ins rather than a guide. Our company didn't love that arrangement, but Cassidy had earned it over 2 previous seasons, and she knew the mountain better than most of the guided clients we put on it. I'd spoken to her probably 30 times over the past 3 weeks. She was precise on the radio, gave clear position reports, never wasted transmission time. I liked her. That's worth saying. The first thing I noticed was a position discrepancy. I was running routine GPS checks around mid-morning when I saw that Cassidy's tracker had her near a section of the northeast ridge where a well-known body had been sitting in the same location for 11 years. I'd tracked probably 60 climbers past that spot over my 3 seasons. I noted her position and moved on to the next check. 20 minutes later, she radioed in for her scheduled check-in. Voice normal, breathing slightly elevated from the altitude but controlled. She gave her position, confirmed conditions on the route, said visibility was good. Then, almost as an afterthought, She asked me if there'd been any seismic activity reported in the region in the last 48 hours. I told her not that I was aware of and asked why. She said the body that had been on that section of the ridge for years wasn't where it was supposed to be. She'd passed the exact spot, the spot she'd passed twice before on previous seasons. The body wasn't there. The snow around where it should have been was disturbed in a way that didn't look like wind. She said it looked like it had moved. I told her to keep moving and check in at the next waypoint. My brain was already running through explanations. Wind can shift bodies at altitude, especially after heavy accumulation. A recent snowfall could have destabilized the position. It happens occasionally. I made a note to report it to our Nepalese liaison. For the next hour, I didn't think about it much. Then Bravo Team's lead called in from Camp 2. Dar said one of her clients had taken a short rest walk near the camp perimeter and come back reporting a body on the slope below camp. A figure, face down, half covered in snow, roughly 40 meters below the camp's edge. Old gear, the client said. Gear that looked like it was from a different era. I checked my records. There was no known body in that location. I'd been tracking teams past Camp 2 for 3 seasons. I'd have known. I called Otto. I gave him what I had. The displaced body on the northeast ridge. The unidentified figure below Camp 2. I kept my voice level because keeping my voice level was part of the job, and because I didn't have anything solid yet. Just 2 strange reports that might have mundane explanations. Otto was quiet for a moment, in that specific way of his, the way that meant he was thinking rather than hesitating. He said he'd checked the slope above Camp 3 in the morning. He called back 40 minutes later. He hadn't waited for morning. He said there was a body on the slope above Camp 3 that he had never seen before. He said this carefully, and then he said it again, because he understood what it meant coming from him. 31 seasons. He knew everybody on the routes he climbed the way a bus driver knows every stop on the line. He'd never seen this one. I sat with that for a moment. Then I wrote it on the whiteboard and stared at what I'd written and started running weather data to see if there was anything that could explain 3 separate anomalies on 3 separate sections of the mountain on the same morning. The weather data didn't help. The wind dropped that night. This sounds like a good thing, and in any other context it would have been. For Everest in May, it was just unusual. The mountain rarely goes quiet, and when it does, the quiet has a quality that's hard to describe. Like the absence isn't just sound, but something else, some background frequency you didn't know was there until it stopped. I noticed it sitting in the communications tent around 11. I could hear my own breathing. Cassidy's check-in was scheduled for 11:30. She didn't call. I tried her radio at the scheduled time and got nothing. I tried again at 20 minutes past and got nothing. I switched to her satellite communicator. Nothing. I went to her GPS signal on my laptop and it was moving. Slowly, but definitely moving. Heading down the mountain. I watched it for a while before I did anything else, trying to find the explanation that meant she was fine. Equipment failure for comms, but GPS still working, which was possible. Injury requiring descent, which would explain the downward movement, and I'd hear from her when she could reach me. Oxygen issue causing confusion, though her position suggested she was descending deliberately and not in distress. I watched the signal move and couldn't make any of the explanations settle. I woke Rue, our base camp manager, and told her we had a missed check-in and movement on Cassidy's tracker with no radio contact. Rue was good in these situations, calm and methodical, and she started the missed check-in protocol immediately. But we both knew that at altitude in the dark, there was no search going anywhere until first light, and pretending otherwise didn't help anyone. I went back to the communications tent and called Otto. I told him Cassidy's GPS was showing movement, but she wasn't responding to anything. He asked what kind of movement. I said slow, very slow and very steady. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he said he was going to look outside his tent. I listened to 30 seconds of silence and the faint sound of a tent zipper. Then Otto's voice came back, and it was controlled in the way that takes effort to be. He said there was a figure standing on the slope above Camp 3, upright, not moving, visible by the light of the camp lanterns. I asked if it could be one of his team. He went quiet for a few seconds. I could hear him moving. Then he said all 4 of his team members were in their tents. He'd confirmed it. I asked him to describe the figure. He described the gear. I didn't know every piece of equipment on everybody on the mountain, but I knew enough. From 3 seasons of intake briefings and route descriptions and the kind of knowledge that accumulates when you do this work long enough to know that what he was describing was not modern. It was not this decade or the last one. He said the same thing I was already thinking. He said it quietly, like saying it too loud might change something. He said he recognized the gear as belonging to someone who had died on that section of the ridge in 1996. Someone he had been passing on this mountain for 27 years. Neither of us said anything for a moment. Then I told him to get his team ready to move at first light. By the time the sky started going pale, the situation had spread past my ability to contain the information. 3 separate teams had reported bodies in wrong locations. 2 teams had seen upright figures at a distance. Cassidy was still moving downward on GPS and still not responding. Otto had counted at least 4 figures visible on the slope above Camp 3. By the time there was enough light to see them clearly, and he described their movement in a way I've thought about many times since. He said they moved like something that had forgotten. It knew how. I was running 4 radio channels simultaneously, relaying between teams, fielding calls from the Nepalese liaison, who had started getting reports from other companies on the mountain, and trying to update a whiteboard that was becoming less useful by the hour because the fixed points I'd been using as references for 3 seasons were no longer fixed. The picture that assembled itself over the course of that morning was this. The bodies were heading down. Not all of them, not at any significant speed, but the ones that were moving in one consistent direction, down the routes, the same routes that living climbers used to descend, the routes that all connected, eventually, to the same point at the bottom. Base camp. Dar radioed in from Camp 2. She said one of her clients had gotten close enough to one of the figures on the slope below them to give a description. I asked what she saw. Dar relayed it, and I wrote it down, and then I told her client to get back inside the camp and stay there. The description was not a living person. It wasn't behaving like a living person. It was moving downhill at a slow, even pace, and it had not reacted to the client's presence at all. I pulled up the math I didn't want to pull up. Over 200 bodies, moving slowly, but moving toward the fixed routes. And the fixed routes led here, I told Rue. She looked at the numbers on my screen for a long moment, and then she went to start coordinating the other expedition companies. Getting Bravo team down was faster than it should have been, which meant Dar had already started moving them before I gave the official call, which meant she'd drawn the same conclusions I had about 20 minutes before I caught up. I liked her even more for that. They descended through the morning with Dar on the radio to me every 20 minutes. The figures they could see on the slopes above were not increasing speed, were not reacting to the team's movement, were not doing anything that suggested active pursuit. They were just coming down. Patient and slow and steady, small mercy. I held on to it. Bravo team reached Camp 1 and then the lower camps, and I counted them into base camp in the early afternoon, all of them present. Otto and Team Alpha were harder because they were higher, and because navigating down from Camp 3 with figures on the slope above required constant position updates from me to Otto so he could route the team around them. We were on the radio together for most of the morning, me reading GPS positions and slope reports from other teams, and Otto translating that into movement decisions for 4 clients who were tired and scared and needed to believe their guide had everything in hand. Otto had everything in hand. He kept his voice so steady the whole time that I think some of his clients didn't fully understand what was happening until they were well below Camp 2. Cassidy's GPS entered a terrain dead zone around mid-morning. Her signal dropped. I stared at the blank indicator on my screen for a while. Then I told Rue. Rue noted it in the log, and we moved on because there was too much else moving to stop. The other expedition companies were pulling out of base camp through the afternoon. The route to the nearest village with infrastructure was well established, and the volume of people meant it was organized, not panicked. But the pace had an urgency to it that was impossible to mistake. I stood in the door of the communications tent twice to watch it, and both times I could see the upper slopes above the camp, and both times there were more figures visible than the last time I'd looked. Slow, patient, still coming down. Dar came to the communications tent about an hour after Bravo team made base camp. She sat down across from me, and she was quiet for a moment, in the way of someone choosing where to start. I gave her the tea she asked for, and waited. She said there was something about the descent she hadn't said over the radio, because she hadn't wanted to say it over an open channel with her clients listening. She said they'd recognize some of them. I asked what she meant. She said one of the figures they'd passed on the descent was someone she knew. Not personally, she'd never met her, but she was well known in the climbing community, someone Dar had read about before her first season, someone with a well-documented story, a specific face that appeared in a specific photograph in a book that a lot of people in this community had read. She said the figure had walked past them on the slope without looking at them, moving downhill at that same slow, even pace, not reacting to their presence at all. She said she'd been certain. You know a face you've seen enough times? I asked her again if she was okay. She said she didn't know yet, and she'd appreciate it if we could not talk about it for a few minutes. We sat in the tent together, and I monitored the radio, and she drank her tea, and outside the sounds of base camp breaking down continued. Team Alpha was making good time. Otto and I had been on the radio steadily for hours, and I knew their position within a few hundred meters at all times, which was the only way I could route them clear of the figures on the slopes, which had become numerous enough that it required active navigation. They were an hour from base camp when Otto said there were figures on the route below them. Not above, below. I pulled up the GPS overlay and the position data from the other teams and tried to reconstruct where the cluster would have come from. The math said it was possible. If the bodies on the upper sections of the route had been moving since the night before, they could have reached that position by now, slow but continuous. I asked how many. Otto said more than he could count clearly in the available light. I sat with the map in front of me and ran the alternative routes. There was one option, an older line down the western approach to the glacier, longer and harder and not maintained this season, that would bring them into base camp from the west rather than the east. It hadn't been used as a primary route in years. I'd never coordinated a descent along it. I gave Otto the redirect. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He said, "Understood," and I heard him relaying the new route to his team in a calm, matter-of-fact voice, and they adjusted, and they moved. I tracked them on that line for the next hour with my heart in my throat the whole time, watching their GPS cluster move steadily down the alternative approach, watching the other figures' positions on the main route, doing the math every few minutes to make sure there was enough distance between them. The distance held. Team Alpha came through the base camp perimeter from the west as the last of the other companies finished their evacuation on the eastern side. I was the last person in the communications tent. I'd stayed to keep the radio live for Otto's approach, and I counted them in one by one as they crossed the camp boundary, Otto calling each name over the radio as they cleared, me checking them off the list. 4 clients. Otto. All 5. I keyed the radio one last time and said all clear to the liaison, and then I turned off the equipment. Everything off. Screen dark. I'd been sitting at that station for going on 20 hours, and my body knew it. I stepped outside. The upper slopes were busy in a way that Everest had never been busy. Figures on every line, visible even at this distance, moving steadily down toward a base camp that was now empty. The glacier, the colored tent footprints already being erased by wind. The mountain above it, all doing what it had been doing for however many millions of years it had been doing it. Not the same mountain it was yesterday, not the same mountain it was this morning. Something had changed in it, and I didn't understand the mechanism, and I didn't think understanding the mechanism would have made it better. I walked with the group down the glacier toward the valley, and I didn't look back, and after the first 20 minutes, I stopped wanting to. I've been home for a while now. I'm back in a normal-sized city, at a normal altitude, and I sleep in a real bed, and the wind doesn't work at the walls all night. It's fine. I'm fine. I want to be clear about that. The coverage of what happened used careful language, geological event, unusual seismic activity affecting snowpack and ice conditions, officials investigating reports of movement on the upper slopes attributed to post-season ice shift. I read it, and I understood why it was written that way, and I didn't expect anything different. The climbing community's version circulated privately. People who'd been on the mountain that season, or who knew people who had been. That version was more accurate and also more useless in terms of what you did with it. because knowing the accurate version didn't change anything about the world except the inside of your head. A journalist contacted me, and I didn't respond. A researcher from a university I'd never heard of sent a detailed email asking specifically about body positions relative to their known locations in the days before the event, and I read it twice and didn't respond to that one either. Some doors you choose not to open, not because you're afraid of what's on the other side, but because walking through them doesn't help anyone and it doesn't help you. What I think about more than I want to is Cassidy's GPS going dark in that dead zone. I tell myself the signal dropped because of terrain interference, battery failure, any of the technical reasons a GPS signal goes dark in a remote, high-altitude environment, and there are several, and all of them are plausible. I've told myself this enough times that there are days it sits fine. Then there are the other days. I didn't look up her name in the coverage. I decided not to do that, and I've held to it. Some things you keep at arm's length, not because they aren't real, but because pulling them close doesn't change them, and it changes you. And the version of me that got those 5 people off the mountain is a version I'd like to stay close to for as long as I can. I'm not going back next season. I've told the company, and they were decent about it, didn't push. Maybe they understood, or maybe they had enough other applicants that it didn't matter. Either way, the conversation was short. I've been thinking about what Otto said, how they moved like something that had forgotten it knew how. I've turned that description over a lot. The way you turn something over looking for the angle where it makes the most sense, and I haven't found that angle yet. What I keep coming back to is the thing I said at the beginning, that the cold doesn't end you up there. It suspends you. Everything preserved, everything held in place, held in the position it landed in, for years and decades, and as long as the cold holds. And the cold had held for a long time. Whatever changed it, I don't know. I don't think the researchers know either, or they wouldn't be emailing base camp communications coordinators asking about GPS logs. I don't think it's a question that's going to get a clean answer. And I've been in this field long enough to know that not everything that happens on that mountain gets a clean answer. What I know is what I could see from the camp perimeter on my way out. Every line on the mountain had figures on it, moving slowly and steadily downward in the last light. Patient in the way that something is patient when time stopped meaning anything to it a long time ago. The mountain that's been up there for millions of years, holding everything it's ever been given, had apparently decided it was done holding. I think about that sometimes. Late at night when the apartment is quiet, the mountain deciding, like it had been patient long enough, and whatever kept everything suspended had finally, on one cold May night, when the wind dropped and the mountain went quiet, simply let go. I don't know if I believe that's what happened. I don't have a better explanation. I got 5 people of the mountain, and I went home, and I'm not going back. That's the part I had control over. That's the part I hold on to. Everything else I tried to leave up there where I found it.